Here we're going to learn how to add and modify a campaign in the VCDAL admin interface. First thing we want to do is go to the VCDAL admin interface and then go to where it says campaigns at the top. Once we're here, we're going to hit add a new campaign. Now the campaign ID, I recommend that you use numbers. For the sake of this presentation, we're just going to choose 101 101. The campaign name can be whatever you'd like, except it has to be at least 6 characters long. Spaces do count as characters. So for this, I'm just going to choose test space 1, and that'll count as our 6 characters. And then we hit submit. So once the campaign is created, we can now modify it. The campaign description is arbitrary. You don't need to have it. It just provides further explanation of what this campaign's about. Now next, we want to go down to where it says dial status. Now the dial statuses are the statuses from the list that are going to be dialed for this campaign. The first time you load a list, they'll all be considered new. So that's why it's here by default. It's going to dial all the new leads. Now once all the leads have been dialed and there are no more leads to be dialed in that list, it will not automatically reset itself. You have to manually go in, as we saw when loading our leads, to reload the list, or reset the list, I should say. It's done very easily, as you saw with the loading of leads. After we've reset the list, then there will essentially be no new lead statuses left to be dialed. So it's going to dial everything that's in the not called category of the list. So after you reset the list, it's going to dial everything that you dictate in the dial status here. So if you would like to call the answering machines back, we simply hit add for answering machine. If you'd like to call back the dropped calls, agent not available, we simply hit add. The dropped calls basically means the lead was called, they picked up the phone, said hello, but there was no agent to accommodate them because they were all on phones. So the system ended the call, and that was considered a dropped call. If you want to call the busies back, for instance, we're going to hit add, and everything that's in the dial status are the only statuses that will be called from that list after the list has been reset. And we can go so on and so forth. The no answer auto dials, that's a big one. We're going to hit add. No answer auto dial simply means that the list was called for a predetermined amount of time. The lead was called for a certain amount of time. No one picked up the phone. No answering machine was engaged, or nothing to that effect. It just rang for a certain amount of seconds, and then the system just dropped that call and went on to the next lead. So no one picked up that phone. And then you can pretty much go on, so on and so forth as far as dial statuses go. Now the list order is set to down right now, which means it's going to dial the list from the top down. We can set it to up, which means that it will dial the list from the bottom up, depending on how it was loaded into the system. And we've got a couple other options here as well. Down by last name, down by second count, third count, etc. The count basically means how many times the lead was called, or how many times it was reset, I should say. So if we have 5,000 leads, for instance, and it was called once and we reset it, now the count is 1 because it's already been called once. If they've all been called a second time and we reset the list, now the count is 2 because that means that the list has been called twice already, so on and so forth. I'm going to set this to down. Now next I want to cover the hopper level. If you have 10 or fewer agents, I would recommend setting the hopper to 50. The hopper is essentially the holding chamber for your leads. It pulls a certain amount of leads set here in the hopper level from the list to be dialed based on your dialing ratio, which we're going to cover right now. The method to use, I would choose ratio. You've got manual, which is basically dialing leads one at a time. The agents have the ability to use the lead preview. So they'll hit dial next number on their interface, their agent interface, and then the next lead would come up, and then they'd hit dial, and then it would dial manually from there. It's not much different than dialing leads with a regular phone. But we're going to choose ratio for this, which will give us the ability to dial more than one line for every agent on the system. So ratio is the dial method of choice. The auto dial level is simply the ratio of lines per agent that are being dialed from the system. Now we've got a couple of options here. If I click on the drop down menu, we've got 1 to 1, we've got 1.1 to 1. Um, we can go all the way up to a 4 to 1 ratio, 4.0 to 1. Um, Typically, I'd recommend a 3 to 1 ratio to start. If you're dialing business to consumer, if you're dialing people at home, 3 to 1 it's pretty much what we'd like to start off with. If you're dialing business to business, then I'd recommend something more like 2 to 1 because if you're dialing definitely in the daytime, you'll find that a lot more businesses are there rather than people at home in the daytime. So 2 to 1 is acceptable for business to business. For business to consumer, I'd recommend 3 to 1. You can always go up and down from there. Now, something to note. When you change the auto dial level, your agents do not have to be logged out of the system. You can do this on a whim, anytime you'd like, and it'll take effect immediately. So what this means is if I have 5 agents logged into the system, and they're set at 3 to 1, that means it's going to be dialing 15 lines until someone picks up the phone and it gets transferred to the agent. So this is for every agent that's logged into the system. That's what the dial ratio controls. Now I'm going to scroll down to where it says next agent call. Right now it's set to random, but I like to choose oldest call finish. This means that the person who's been waiting for a call the longest will get the next call. You also have the ability to do oldest call start. You've got campaign rank, which means you can set each agent that you have. If you have some that are stronger closers than others, you can rank your agents based on user. And you have the ability to go from -9 to +9. So the higher the rank, the higher likelihood that they'll get the next call. Even if they just got off a call and someone's been waiting for a call for 30 seconds, this guy just got off. If his rank is higher than the guy who's been waiting 30 seconds, he'll get the next call because his campaign rank is higher. You can also set it to fewest calls, which means the person who has the fewest amount of calls will get the next call, so on and so forth. So we're going to choose oldest call finish in this instance. Next, we're going to cover local call time. Local call time is, you got a couple options here in the drop down. You've got 10 to 4, you have 12 to 5, 24-hour dialing. Local call time basically means that the system will not dial a lead until it's at least the start of the local call time in that specific time zone. For instance, if we're located here on the East Coast and we've got nationwide leads to dial in our leads list, we have Eastern, we have Pacific, Mountain Time, and we set it to, let's say, 9 to 9, which is probably what I'd recommend system-wide. 9 to 9 falls within the legal limit of times to call. So if we set it from 9 to 9, it's not going to dial Eastern Time leads until it's 9 o'clock Eastern Time Zone. Likewise, it's not going to dial any Central leads until it's at least 9 o'clock Central Time. So if it's 9:30 Eastern Time, it's not going to dial anything but Eastern Time leads because it's only 8:30 in Central, and so on and so forth. Once it reaches 9 o'clock Central Time, it will not only dial Central Time leads because it's 9 o'clock there, but it'll continue to dial Eastern Time leads because it's also after 9 o'clock there as well. Now, the minute that it hits 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, it'll stop dialing Eastern leads and it'll continue to dial Central, Mountain, and Pacific time zones leads until it's at least 9 o'clock in those specific time zones as well. Now, if you'd like to create another local call time that's not listed here, we can simply hit local call time in blue, and that'll take us to the link of the actual time zone, or the local call time, I should say, and we can modify the default start and the default stop here. You can also set it per day if you want to set it so that on Mondays you'd like to go from 900, and this is done in military time, by the way, from 9 o'clock to, let's say, 4 o'clock. It's going to be 900 to 1600 hours, and that's when we'll stop on Mondays. If Tuesday you'd like for the system to only start at 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, we would act accordingly. Otherwise, we would set everything to 0, and we would choose a universal time in the default start and default stop. So 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock is what it's currently set at right now. If you'd like to change that, that would be set here in default start, default stop. When we're done here modifying the time, we simply hit submit and it would automatically take effect.